Hey John,
There we go. Unmuted. How are you?
doing great, thanks. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
Where you
Uh,
calling in from today?
I am in Chicago,
Okay, nice.
frozen stiff Chicago.
Oh
It's,
dear, yeah, I've
it's
heard
starting
I've
to
heard
get,
it gets icy there in the wintertime.
it's already starting to get bad.
That your hometown?
No, no, no. Actually, I was born in Romania.
Ah, okay.
I'm a foreigner. Came here when I was about 7 years old. My uncles fled the communist regime there, and then they got
Mm-hmm.
my mom out and me, and here we are. In fact, we ended up in Italy at first, because you need to get a visa to come over, and we were gonna end up staying there actually.
Okay.
So I'd have been talking Italian if we didn't get over here. So here we are.
Yeah. I think you guys probably made the wrong decision. I mean, I visited Italy earlier this year. It's beautiful, but it's they need to start having some kids, man. The
Uh,
Italians just
you're in Spain, right?
I'm in Spain these days. Yeah, these people need to start having some more kids too. You know, someone's got to bankroll the pensions for all the old people.
Yeah, what an issue, right? I mean, in Japan, they're actually advertising for guys from other countries to go there and populate the nation.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
the
very
Japanese
curious.
being Japanese is like that's a huge, huge concession for those guys because they are very much like
Yes,
our way or the highway.
exactly. So I thought that was very strange, and I was like, wow, the world's that bad in terms of population. I guess it is.
I mean, the people here are still very family oriented, but it just seems like they wait later and later. And I know, I
Hmm.
mean, people in the US are. I know it's the same issue everywhere you go, but people in the US still seem to be like want to marry, want to have kids. It's not become as huge an issue there as it has here in Europe.
No, but I think it is becoming more and more. Younger people are waiting, and I think a lot of it has to do, is my personal opinion, with all the, if I can speak frankly, all the bullshit chaos that the liberals created out here. I mean, people don't even know who they are.
They
It's
don't
like,
know.
you know. And so I think part of that has caused like massive confusion among people. That's only the last 4 years, but I think just over the last probably 10, 15 years, I talked to different people that are younger. They're like, yeah, we're waiting because things are kind of tough and things like that. So, I think you just got to go for it, man. Things will work out. You just got to go for it.
This is what I tell all my friends. Like I'm 44 now. I became a father at 33. My dad became a father when he was 25, and probably his dad became a father in his early 20s as well.
Yeah,
And
sure.
you know, like I'm glad I waited a little bit, but I'm also glad I didn't wait any longer than I did because I see some of my
Yeah.
friends like having their first kid in their late 30s, early 40s, and they just there's some basic reality factors, which is like you don't have as much energy, to roll around
That's
and wrestle with them on the mat.
that's a really good point. Yeah, it's
Yes,
interesting.
son.
My dad was 42
Hey,
and I
John, I
was
gotta
30.
pause you for one sec. Hold that thought. My son's shouting from down on the street, telling me to open the door. So I'll be right back.
Not a problem, not a problem.
I'm on a call, Isaac. Okay. Hey, thank you for your patience.
Not a problem. Yeah, so I was saying my dad was 42 and I was 30, but his dad was in his early 20s when they had a bunch of kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of interesting how that worked out. But no, I agree with you. I was 30, then that's when we had my son, and at 34, we had my daughter. And my wife and I were talking about it later on, closer to 40, because I'm 51. And she's like, "Oh, I think I want to have," and I go, you got to be kidding me. I go, I don't have enough energy to get up and go for a workout. Like I don't need any more, right? And now my kid's in jujitsu. So now I'm going with him and, rolling and all that. And it's like, man, I wish I was 30. Because at 51, it's not the same anymore. That's for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I've actually looking at the jujitsu gym in town. I've only done it maybe like 10 or 15 sessions total, but really, really enjoyed it. It's good. And I got out of the habit, picked it up for a while, got out of the habit, we moved, and then I want to get back in the habit now. I've got a friend of mine who keeps on poking at me. He's like, do it, do it, do it. And he
It's
is absolutely
fun.
right. Yeah, it's too, we're so comfortable now. It is like, we're so comfortable. It's like, we're so rarely in physically stressful situations. I mean, even going to the gym, like it's very controlled. You're in charge of it all.
Right.
You choose when you start, you choose when you stop, going for a run, any of that stuff. Like when you do anything that's related to like sparring or wrestling with another person, like I know it's still a controlled environment, but there's that moment or two where they're not letting up and you better not let up either. And you've got to, whatever, complete the 2 minute spar or whatever it is. And just for those
Right.
2 minutes where there's a little bit of chaos, a little bit of physical chaos, a little bit of physical pressure on your body, very good to be reminded about that part of reality that we don't see enough of these days.
That's a great point. It's funny because that's crazy. I was thinking about that in the shower today of all places. And I'm thinking,
Okay.
we don't have enough physical stress, good physical stress anymore. You
Mhm.
get up, you walk to your desk, you do your stuff for 5, 6 hours or longer, and then you get to other stuff, but you not. And so I had decided, I watch Andrew Huberman. He's a
Yeah.
neuroscientist. Okay, you know what I'm talking about? And he's got this very simple protocol. He's like, get up first thing in the morning, get yourself ready, and then get out the door and just run like a bear's coming after you for like 30 minutes or walk, whatever, do whatever for like 30 minutes to an hour, then come back and start your day. And that will really wake you up. That'll get things going. And he's 100% right. There's like, all those endorphins come up and all that stuff, doing it first thing in the morning. And having that little bit of stress in a good way is, I think copywriters need to do that even several times a day because you get so bogged down, you got to get the stress relief, out of it. So, by the way,
Mhm.
how did you get involved in this crazy business? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
No, I'm about to ask you the same thing, but briefly, I watched a documentary many years ago. But my real story is I had this weird experience. I was in my 20s. I was living in like a shared home with a bunch of friends, and one of the buddies living with us was a real manipulative bastard. And he had us all, he's running rings around all of us. He'd tell one guy one thing, he'd tell another person the other person. He was extremely devious, extremely manipulative, and he was always putting, for whatever reasons, the type of guy he was just that way. He just was always setting everybody at loggerheads against each other.
Mm.
And it all kind of turned a bit nasty, and I moved out of that place. And afterwards, it's like, man, that guy did a fucking number on me. Like, he really did a number on me. How did he do that? I want to know. I don't want
Ah,
that to happen again. So I started to learn a little bit about like persuasion, manipulation, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and I just started to be okay. Is this thing? And then I found out about, you probably know who, of course, you know who it is, Edward Bernays, the
yeah.
founding father of public relations. I watched a documentary on the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. They have a documentary which you can find on YouTube now called The Century of the South. And it was a 4 hour documentary about Mr. Edward Bernays and his career in public relations. I'm guessing that was like late 2000s. So I'm guessing it must have been around the time where Mad Men was out. And I didn't actually watch the show Mad Men at the time. I've since
Mhm.
watched, I think, the first couple of seasons, maybe 3, 4 years ago. But I think that was around the time it came out. So there might have been a renewed kind of interest in the world of advertising and all that kind of stuff at that time. And I just thought this was really, really interesting. This is an interesting industry. But I was in the construction industry, so I didn't really give it too much thought. And then a few years later, I wanted to get out of construction. And I thought, by that stage, I was not really doing as much making things anymore. I was more like at the project management and doing a bit of sales and marketing. So I'd
Okay.
started to like learn about this stuff again. And I was like, I could just go and do the sales and marketing stuff instead. Let's give that a try. So I quit construction in 2018 and got my first copywriting client beginning of 2019. I've just been doing it ever since.
Fantastic. That's great. So my story started with I got out of the Marine Corps.
Nice.
I'm 21 years old. I don't know shit about anything. Like I could shoot somebody at 500 yards, but like that's all my skills were basically, right? You don't really learn anything in the Marine Corps unless you're in different MOSs. Um, yeah.
Can I ask you, how did you get into the Marine Corps before you got out of this?
Oh, so well, in high school, I made a decision like when I was in my junior year that I was going to go in the military one way or another. I just
Yes.
wanted to do that. So my grades were pretty good. I could have gone to college. I could have, but I just wasn't really interested in that. So um, my half brother had gone to the Marine Corps and he got a great job. He was working on jets and he's like, oh, it's fantastic. Da, da, da. Little did I know that everybody in the Marine Corps is a rifleman, whether you were male, female, a private, or a commandant. That is your job. That is your MOS. Basically, your job is to kill people. I mean, that's the
Hmm.
bottom line. And yeah, I didn't want to kill anybody. Nobody does really if you're normal, right? But that was the job, and that's what you learn. And what they do is they put you where they need you, even if you pick an MOS. So I got put into an MOS that was not for me. And so I didn't, my experience there wasn't all that great. Anyway, I ended up getting out and I took three assessment tests, like career assessment tests, because I wanted to figure out, okay, what am I naturally good at? And they all came back with sales, marketing, and copywriting. I'm like, what the hell is copywriting? I was thinking like legal stuff. So I looked into it some more, and I didn't really think much of it afterwards, but I did get into sales. I got into real estate, and I started selling for Century 21. And at the time, it was like a transition period in the industry here in the US where they used to train you when you went at a company. Well, they stopped doing that because what they were finding out is they're training people, people would start succeeding and then they would leave. Go to a
Hmm.
competitor or start their own company. So they stopped training. So I started figuring out on my own, like reading books and whatever, how to get this thing going. And all roads at that time led to one thing: cold call prospecting. So I was hitting the phones, I was knocking on doors, which today you don't want to do. I was doing all that stuff that, um, they said would make you successful. And I did have some success with it, but it was very hard. It was just like it was grinding because nobody really wanted to get cold calls, all that stuff. So anyway, I ended up working for the number one Remax agent in our area in Northwest Indiana, which is part of Chicagoland. And she exposed me to Bob Proctor. She had all the tapes. Bob Proctor, at the time, John Assaraf was the owner of Remax of Indiana,
Hmm.
right? So I had met him briefly, and we had all these different tapes on how to do what you need to do. And one of the things that I came across was because my question was, who's the best agent in the world? Well, at the time, it was Craig Proctor, and he was for Remax anyway, and he was running full page ads in Realtor Magazine, direct response ads that were saying like, "Hey, I sell a house a day, and I've got this reverse prospecting system," which was music to my ears. And any realtor who understands like prospecting at that time was just not going to work very well. You
Hmm.
really would have to hire people to help you to do it properly. And I'm like, well, what is this thing, right? So we bought it. And then we didn't use his system exactly. We used a different system. But what it was you would run ads that said free report reveals the 12 things you should know before you list your house, right? People would call. Now we have a list. Now we work that list, and some of those people end up becoming listings. Then what we did was we put riders on all the houses that we had, all the listings we had. And the rider would say free recorded message, call 1-800 whatever, and then there would be an extension. So let me get into a little bit of psychology here. What I found, and this came to me like it just came to me, it occurred to me nobody wanted to talk to a realtor. Now, this is like right when the internet, yeah, this is right when the internet started. So you didn't have access to everything. The realtors actually kind of possessed access, and they were
Hmm.
kind of gatekeepers, right? So I'm like, well, how do you get people to talk to you if they don't want to talk to you, right? And this system did it because what would happen is they would call, they would listen to a recorded message about a property, right? The message was about a minute long. And it gave them enough info, but not everything. And then it would page me, right, with the extension of the property. And I call back and I'm like, hey, I think you just called us on 123 Main Street. Is that right? Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, my name is John. I'm with Remax. I'm getting back to you because we didn't have enough time to leave all the information. And there's something that just came in on this property that you might be interested in. And this is all truthful too, because we left
Hmm.
info on purpose, obviously. For one, because we wanted to be able to call back. For two, because otherwise your phone bill would be like $10,000 a month. Because at the time it was quite expensive. So we would then call them back in. What ended up happening, John, is our lead count went from about 40 to 50 a month to around 400 to 500 a month. My income went up 6.5 times. And I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing. Well, I then started digging. How did he learn how to do this? So I found out he wasn't writing those ads. Dan Kennedy was writing those ads. Okay. This was the Dan Kennedy, what became the Dan Kennedy Jeff Paul model.
Hmm.
Uh, if you remember how to make, whatever it was, $3,000 a day in your underwear, that thing. But that was a great course because that started a whole bunch of different businesses. And what a lot of people don't realize is that model is technically what's being used today in a lot of expert businesses to some extent. It's definitely part of that. So um, we found out that it was Dan Kennedy. We found out that he also was studying with Jay Abraham. And then I started buying their stuff, started reading it, started practicing copy, started doing the things you're supposed to do. And then my ads started working and they started working pretty well. Then we started doing it for real estate investing. That worked pretty well. And then eventually I had a friend who was looking at my stuff. He's like, you should probably talk to Gary Halbert because he might kind of, guide you. And he was friends with him. So I had a chat with Halbert and he's like, he looked over some ads. He's like, you should hang out your shingle. He goes, this is actually really good copy. You should, but I still didn't know what I was doing. Like I was doing it, what is that called? Unconscious competence, I guess.
Hmm.
Was doing it okay, but I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I got some stuff from him. I ended up working with him on a project and we are supposed to do some more work, but unfortunately he passed away right at that time actually. And so I got my confidence from him, and I actually mentored under him a little bit. I got all his stuff. I went through everything that he taught, and I did the work that had to be done. And eventually, I got good enough to where I felt comfortable hanging on my shingle, and here we are.
Nice. Did that take you up to around kind of maybe the mid 2000s? Am I right about that? About like 2006,
Yeah,
2007?
that's 2006, right? That's about
That's around the time Gary Halbert passed away around that time.
yeah, I believe it was Easter.
Okay. And then, so at that point, then um, you've gone from actually being somebody who, just like almost everybody in this industry, kind of got biz upped into the industry, like buy this system to do this thing, gets curious about like what the hell is this thing? How did they get me to take this action? And then follows it down the rabbit hole to where you go to where it's actually okay, sell the underlying service rather than the manifestation of it, which is a product or a coaching program or whatever it is.
Yeah, it was really interesting how that worked. And then just like you mentioned, I talked to a few people who had pretty much the same experience. But I got really good at this, in my opinion, and the results would say it. The problem with, and I guess this, if this is going to go out to copywriters, I would say pick your clients carefully because I know I've done over 100 million in sales, but that's not actually true. It's way more than that. But I work with clients that didn't always give the figures, didn't know it, like, and so, but I see stuff where like I've had one letter that ran for 10 years online. And they tried beating it and it didn't, nobody was able to beat it, but I was never given the numbers. So it was that you got to kind of be careful who you're working with. And at the time I was younger and I was like, well, a paycheck's a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to set yourself up so it's not just a paycheck. You got to set yourself up so that you can create residual, that you can leverage off of that. And so I learned those things, over time and along the way, and getting beat up a little. Uh, it's inevitable.
That's one big thing that seems to have changed a lot in the industry where, you know, look, the last few years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people have come into the business or tried to be a copywriter or have thought of themselves as a copywriter without really having that sort of more old school like apprenticeship where they learn from somebody who was already very accomplished. They may have bought a coaching program or bought a course, and I kind of came in that way as well. And it takes a good long while where there's that graph about like confidence and competence and how like you're high confidence at the beginning and then you realize you totally suck and you go right down to the pit of despair and then it takes you a long, long time to climb up to the level where your confidence actually kind of comes back to where it might have been earlier on. Now you actually have some confidence to go along with this. I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but yeah, all of that stuff happening. Um, for now, it's like people come in and they just hope they can get a client. But it sounds like the time you came up, it was still a little bit more like the industry's smaller. The people who are actually hiring and the people who are training and coaching are more serious about the whole thing. So when you work with companies that time, you can go in, they do these type of like residuals or performance models. Nowadays, I don't think too many copywriters get paid that way. It's kind of become a lot more of a commodity service in recent years for most.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's unfortunate that it's a commodity service because it really isn't. It would be like saying, and it's happened already, like in the sales industry, salespeople are a commodity, but they're really not because the ones that know what they're doing, I mean,
Hmm.
you know, they can essentially sell enough to keep a company afloat, right? And the ones who don't know, so I think the problem is it's kind of like when I was a realtor, it's so easy to get into it. Well, what's the barrier of entry?
None.
So that's the problem, right? However, when they try to get clients, and then they learn what the barrier of entry is because it's fairly high to an extent for I think for most people. So I don't, it is what it is, right? So you got to pivot. Um, you got people in third world countries now being copywriters. They're using AI and they're able to compete to an extent. I don't think AI writes very good copy.
Hmm.
And we've tested it. We tested like my copy against ChatGPT. What we noticed was the short form stuff, it's okay, but the longer it gets, forget it. It goes off the rails. I do understand that if you prompt correctly and all that, but what I found is the time it takes me to prompt, I can just write the copy. And that's maybe because I've been doing it for so long, right? That's got to
Yes.
be the reason because I talked to other guys like Chris Orzakowski, same things like, screw that. I'm not going to take 30 minutes to prompt it. I'll write the email in 15. I'm like, okay. I understand.
So what have you seen as the differences like between, maybe you've been in this industry a lot longer than most. So between that period in like mid to late 2000s where you're coming up and actually, working with publishers and what you're seeing in the industry as you're still a working copywriter now, how do you see things have changed for you over that period?
The main thing from my perspective that's changed is the technology. And I think now as a copywriter, you have to understand some of the technology. For instance, you have to understand how does an ESP work? How do you get emails delivered? Now, back in the old days, so I look at email like direct mail, right? So I come from direct mail and space advertising. That's what we did back then. That's pretty much all we had. You had TV
Hmm.
and radio, but certain industries work for that, most don't. So we focused on space ads and direct mail. And back then, you would have a list broker who handled all the stuff with the direct mail, getting the list and all that. Now, I think it's a little different. Now, I think as a copywriter, you have to be the one that can handle the media. You have to be able to handle the email service provider, get the
Hmm.
delivery, get all that stuff done. I think that's one big shift that's happened. The other one is just, for instance, you can write copy, but if you know how to build funnels, you're better off doing that. Now, you don't have to even build them yourself. You could hire somebody who knows how to work ClickFunnels, but you still have to know enough to be able to understand here's how a funnel works. Here's the best for you. I mean, you know it because that's what you do now. So I think that's how it's changed. It's not just about copy. Now it's about integrating copy with the technology and understanding how it works. And then the third thing is that interpreting the data, being able to look at it and understand what's going on so you can make tweaks along the way. And this is how, in my opinion, B-level copywriters that I know of are making 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 grand a month. It's not because their copy's so good. It's because they understand the technology and they understand sequences. So they create sequences that create more sales, even though the copy's okay. Whereas before we had one shot, right? When we sent a direct mail letter, like that's pretty much it. You can send follow-ups, but you couldn't sequence. You couldn't take the people who opened the letter and put them in a, you couldn't do any of that. Now you can, which gives you leverage that never existed before.
Yeah, it's interesting. The skill of being able to like really convert people at scale cold is still vanishingly rare. I couldn't honestly claim to be at that level. I'm just not. Um, I can do well in certain niches and categories where I have client work, and I tend to go where the hunting is easier. So I'm doing a lot more stuff related to local business and sort of more like kind of local business and lead gen stuff. But like, because I know some, I've got one friend in particular I can think of who really can write very, very strong whole conversion copy. And he's now got to the point where he's like running his own offers and doing exceptionally well for himself. But I mean, it's that thing. That was I think his core skill that he really refined and took it to a level beyond what most of the people where most people else were writing just good enough. But then even then he reached that point where he's like, okay, copy is now a limiting factor for me. That's not where I'm going to make my next leap. My next leap is I have to like get good at like actually just scaling traffic. And like, he's now really focused to the point where he's gone really deep on ability of like, okay, how do I spend money on advertising and just like scale up acquisition to where he's spending like terrifying sums of money every month on his own card, not clients' money. And like, that's a whole different level of scaling capability that even some of the best copywriters in the world, from a perspective of actually being able to write good conversion copy, can't match. So it's like the scope of what a
Right.
copywriter needs to do to be effective is much broader. And I found that as a working copywriter for the first couple of years, like you said, you don't know the numbers, you don't understand what works and what doesn't. You really have to be able to have a good handle on sort of a bigger part of the process than just the writing to be able to understand where you fit into the whole thing and to be effective and to be actually useful to clients or even to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's the biggest shift that I saw. And yeah, I think copywriters coming in today, of course, you could work at an agency where you don't necessarily need to run that stuff, but I think you need that skill now. So, for instance, I've shifted over. I'm a full stack direct response copywriter. I can write anything. I work with
Mm-hmm.
an agency right now. I work with Digital Media Mavericks, DC Fawcett, and those guys at this point.
Yes, I've heard of them.
They're
Good guys.
steeped in direct response. They understand it 100%. So,
And they
um,
focus very tight on the real estate space, is that right?
real estate, crypto now.
Ah, okay.
We kind of look at what's working. But yeah, real estate was the primary thing because DC had a very successful short sale company in Florida. I think it was the number
Mm-hmm.
one short sale company. He used direct response to build it, and then he's a smart guy. He understands technology. He understood how to buy media, and he got it down to a science. And of course, everybody wanted to work with him because he could convert cold traffic. So in that kind of an environment, you have specialists who understand that stuff, but I still think as a copywriter, you need to learn it. And then you need to start running your own offers. I would say the biggest mistake, and I made this mistake, is not building your own list. You should build your own list constantly, have that list grow, and get it to the point where it could cover your monthly nut every month. So you're covered by your own work, and then you have clients that, you can make more money and you can learn more and so forth and help them. Um, but I'm not really quite sure like where you want to take the conversation. I have so many things I could talk about. So
Yeah,
uh,
I come into these conversations and I really bring people on just to learn about them and what they want to talk about. So any direction you want to bring it, I'm
okay.
good to hear. If you've got something in your mind that you feel like you want to speak on, I want to hear it.
Sure. So as far as because I'm sure most of the people that will be watching this will be copywriters or marketers who hire them. For copywriters, I would say if we go back to the beginning, I think the first thing is making an assessment if this really is for you. Right? Now, it was for me because I saw the dramatic difference in response, in income that happened when we implemented direct response properly, right? I never saw that from branding, by the way. Like I've seen people try to brand themselves, and offline was much harder than it is now. I mean, you needed money. I mean, it's plain and simple.
Yes.
You couldn't go on Instagram and just put up some post and start building an audience. So I think that's the first thing copywriters need to do is assess, is this for me? I did it by accident by taking those um, career assessment tests. And that's what it popped up. I took three different ones because I didn't trust the first one. I was like, sales, I'd never sold anything, but that's what came. So I think that's the first thing I need to do. Kind of make sure this is for you. Then the second thing I think you need to do is they need to learn from the right source, but there's so many people that you could learn from. And I'll tell you something else, like the big guys are not necessarily the best guys to learn from. So if I were, for instance, if I wanted to go into financial copywriting today, I wouldn't start by learning Gary Halbert stuff. It isn't going to help you very much. Okay. I would start by learning from Agora Copy Camp, Kyle Milligan, Evaldo Albuquerque, I believe had a course too. That's
Hmm.
where I learned it, right? So what I'm getting at is I would specialize more. There's nothing wrong with learning the generalities because, and that's how I that's how I started because you can apply them, but the nuances are very specific to each industry. And if you want to be really good at one industry, you need to learn how to write copy for that industry. So those would be the two things: assess if this is right for you, and then choose a niche, and then learn how to write copy for that niche because it's not going to translate 100% to other niches. Like there's nuances you need to know. And then the third thing is put your nose to the grindstone. 2 hours a day for 90 days. Write copy, read copy, analyze copy. That's actually even more important. You don't even have to write a single word to become a good copywriter. You could learn how to analyze it so that you know what's going on under the hood. And you can talk copy into a microphone, have it recorded, and then edit it. And I know people who do that because they don't like writing, but they're
Yes.
effective because they understand the structure, right? So that's what I think they need to do. 90 days of that, read, write, analyze copy, come up with ideas. That's the number one reason Agora would not take a copywriter on is they couldn't come up with ideas. They didn't know how. So those are critical skills. After 90 days, if you don't feel like you're good at that point, there's a problem. You haven't put in the work, right? And then at that point, that's when you start either spending some of your own money to start seeing if what you know actually works. So, for instance, Gary Halbert's litmus test was this: if you want to be a direct mail expert, mail 1,000 letters with your own money and see what you get. If you make back more money than you put into it, you can legitimately call yourself somebody who knows. If you do that dozens of times successfully, now you're an expert. Um, you know, I know a lot of copywriters probably don't want to hear that. And I'm not saying you have to do it dozens of times, but you have to be effective enough. Like I didn't take on any clients until I had already done like $39 million in sales through direct response for my own stuff. Right now, when I say my own stuff, I was working for companies and I was doing it for them as sort of an employee,
Hmm.
right? That's what I produced. So I didn't make 25 million. I made like a fraction of that, but the gross sales were pretty good. And so I understood what I needed to do once I took on clients. Maybe there's a shortcut. I don't know, but usually shortcuts, lead to dead ends. So I think that's kind of the process.
What I found in my own experience and with the experience a lot of people I know have come in around the same time as me is that with the industry being so much bigger and more fragmented now, there's a lot of like teeny tiny sort of bucket shop type businesses, and you can get you can get hired, you can get jobs, you can work with them, but you don't necessarily actually develop a lot from a lot of the work that's out there
Mm,
because they don't necessarily know um, what's good and bad, and so you don't get the feedback and you need. And that's I think why so many people go like run to buying a course or run to buying a coaching program. And as good as those things can be, and once you pay somebody money for it, it screws up the incentives a little bit in that they're more motivated to tell you that you're making progress because they want to
mm,
retain a customer.
right.
And even if you feel like you're making progress, you may not be because you're not getting the signal. The real signal is, will somebody spend money to pay for your stuff?
Exactly. Yeah, I think I worked for a company, an Inc. 5000 agency. Great guys behind the company, but I never ever got any stats. I had to like rattle cages to find out like what is working so I know what to write next. Like and
Hmm.
that type of thing does happen, right? On the other hand, the agency I'm with now, I get all those stats right away because they understand direct response. So one of the things I would say to copywriters is if you're going to go and work for an agency and you don't have experience, but you want to really learn direct response, you want to go to an agency that really understands it. Unfortunately, one of the problems right now is a lot of agencies are saying we're direct response, but I'll give you an example. Um, One of the things that these guys do, and I'm not ragging on anybody because they're actually very competent in what they do, but there's some things that are off. One of the things that they do is they do webinars, right? So my question to them was, well, who is the best webinar writer in the world? Who created the best webinar in the world at this point that we know of? No clue. Well, it's Jason Flalian, or however you
Hmm.
say it. I'm like, how do you not know that? Like, if
He's
you're
the
writing
guy.
webinars, you need to know who the guy is, right? That sort of thing. I found that to be the case in a lot of agencies where it's like they know enough to be dangerous, but they really don't know what they need to know. So I think you have to be careful in that respect. I worked okay with them just because they kind of defaulted to me in terms of the copy. They knew that I knew what I was doing and it worked. And we had major accounts, Marcus Lemonis, Charles Payne on Fox News, like all these huge guys,
Hmm.
and our stuff worked pretty well. And so, but I went in knowing if you're going in new and you don't know, and that was the problem they had with the other copywriters they had before me. They didn't really know what they were doing, and the company wasn't able to really provide them with what they needed either. Right. In that case, I think you're going to have a tough time because unless you're doing your own education on the side and you're going to have a tough time because they don't even know what the heck's going on. So I think you got to be careful. But I would say if you can get your foot in the door with an agency that's steeped in direct response, that's probably going to be a very quick way or a shortcut in a sense for you to learn the business because you're going to get the numbers, you're going to see what really works, you'll see the tests and all that stuff, and that's really important.
So you the companies that used to be the kind of biggest names in direct response, like Agora, they're not where they used to be in terms of the size, their scope, their reach and influence, and even I think their markets have shifted. I mean, like when I think about like financial marketing, like a lot of that's migrated onto YouTube now, and it's like it's almost like people are building these like kind of financial education micro brands on YouTube that, and they're almost like they're all little independent players. Like the one I think about all the time is that guy Raoul Pal. Um,
Mhm.
do you know who I'm talking about? I can't remember what the name of the guy.
Yeah. Is it Inceptly? No, instantly. I
No,
might be mistaken who you're talking about.
but he has like a financial sort of a financial education business that is somewhat direct response, but it's really more based on him building up a big following on YouTube.
Okay, I have to look him up. I was thinking of somebody else.
I gotta find out the name of the business because it's stuck in. Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'll just look it up right now.
But yeah, I agree with you that what's happening in the financial industry is definitely a shift. Um, and the Agora model, I don't think the model itself is flawed. I
Hmm.
think what's flawed is the way it's implemented. And what I mean by that is, so I went through the Agora copy camp, and Joe Schriefer at the time was head of Agora Financial. And what he was saying is, look, what we're trying to do is ethically manipulate people because that's how it is. That's how it works. When you tell your kid, hey, eat your veggies and you get a Christmas gift, right? It's ethical manipulation. So, but the problem is that their copywriters got so creative, and I'll give you an example, that it became unethical no matter how you cut it, but they were still putting out those promotions. So, for instance, they had a promotion. It was called government rent checks or something like that. And what the promotion was about is a few years back is you can buy into companies that essentially these are REITs or REITs, okay, and they would pay out 10% because that they have to like get rid of, I guess, 90% of the profits that come in, whatever those rules are that they have to do. But on average, you would get 10%. And they would have testimonials that would say, oh, yeah, I made $100,000. And they'd be like, and you can get in for just $10. And then they have testimonials I made, well, they didn't make $100,000 off of 10. They made $100,000 off of a million. And that
Hmm.
kind of stuff wasn't transparent. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's how they started getting in trouble. And the FTC obviously comes after them all the time. It's not, so that's part of the broken model, in my opinion, where the copywriters are pushing the envelope to the point where it's going beyond what's ethical and what's right. And also the consumer then knows, right? Like, because they get to say, oh, this is a REIT. Well, I'm not going to make 100 grand because I don't have a million. And that sort of thing is kind of what started happening.
Even that generation had some restraints. I mean, they had to publish, they had to have a physical building. Like the internet has decoupled people from accountability for their work. So there's a lot more stuff out there now that's just straight up fraud. Like, like those type of traditional publishers, they would be aggressive in their marketing, but there was a line, and they knew that if they cross the line, go too far over the line, someone's going to be coming to knock on their door with some documents that they're not going to want to see. Whereas now, there's a lot of people who really feel immune from that risk, so they'll just they go all out.
Yeah.
There's no restraints, and so where does I guess like somebody younger go now to if they want that sort of like real like proper direct response like education and come up? Is it going to the agencies? Are there still publishers out there who can actually provide us? What do people do?
Yeah, that's a great, like, it's got to be a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking about like if I started all over again, what would I do? Well, I think the first thing is to figure out what niche you want to work in. I go back to that.
Start
I
with your
would
market.
take, yeah, I would take a general copywriting course just to learn what copywriting is. Okay. If I had to choose one, I would probably get Scott Haynes' copywriting course.
Hmm.
He wrote it, got Gary Halbert's seal of approval. That course is excellent for general copywriting. You'll learn what you need to learn there. And then I would figure out what my niche is. And then I would see if there's somebody there who's doing really well in the niche. So, for instance, if I wanted to do email copywriting and have an agency, I think Troy Erickson would be the guy to go to, right? You got Christian Davis, right? He's making a shit ton of money. He knows what to do to get clients to be able to do that. So you can learn from them. So I would niche it to that sort of thing in terms of the market. And then after that, I would see, okay, what's the easiest entry point? Now, in my opinion, the easiest entry point is email. Um, I mean, it just is, right? So I would learn how to create email sequences. And I would go in, and in fact, this is what we do now. So I have like a side email marketing agency as well. And the
Hmm.
reason I have that is because I like doing performance deals. I have no problem doing them. I've never been ripped off either, by the way. Knock on wood. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But I never have been because we vet people out properly. And it's very easy to get your foot in the door when you say, look, I've got an email system, okay, that's done this, this, and this. And I can come in and do it for you. No money out of your pocket up front. Just give me a percentage and we work it out. But even if you don't have proof that it works, a lot of people are open to it because there's no money out of pocket for them up front. And if it makes sense, why not test it out? That's the way I would enter the field. I would do a performance deal. I would produce results. I just did one with a month ago, a month and a half ago, with Mark Podolsky. He's the land geek.
Hmm.
He teaches people how to invest in land. We did a performance deal. It brought in 96,000 from the list that his phone closers didn't close. And he's a happy guy. Now, from there, if you want to, now you can get retainer deals very easily. You've already made them money. So, in my opinion, that's the way to start it. If you don't have experience, if you don't have credentials, nobody knows who the hell you are. That's one good way to start it. The only thing is you got to be able to vet people properly. And the way we do it is we simply ask for micro commitments and see if they follow through. If they're not going to follow through on sending me a contract in 2 days, like they said, how long am I going to wait for a check? So it's simple things like that. Like if you see that happening three, four times and they're not following through, okay, then you know you got to make an assessment. Um,
And for you now at this stage in your career, what do you find are the strategies you use to promote yourself and that bring in new business to your door?
yeah, that's a great question. So for whatever reason, I've always had some ability to just send out a bunch of emails and get clients, or send out letters and get clients, or pick up the phone. I'm not afraid. I cold call. Even now I do it. And here's what's funny about that. The reason I still do it on occasion is because if you stop selling, you stop knowing how to sell. And there's a difference to selling over the phone than it is to writing a letter or doing a radio spot or whatever. So I want to not lose that. So I'll do that on occasion. But I would say, my personal opinion, the best way to do it if you want something quick and fast is cold email. And you can hire VAs. I've got a VA right now, $5 an hour. She's only working a couple hours a day. Um, and she's sending out cold email to companies that we might want to do a performance deal with. I think that's the best way to leverage yourself because I mean, maybe you should do it for a couple of months to just see what a pain in the ass it is. Okay. And how much time it takes to find the leads, And then after that, after you see that's not an efficient way, then what you do is you get yourself a list, hire a VA, and have a mail for you. To me, that's probably the easiest way to do it. The other way would be to go to seminars, go to events and meet people. I think networking, like what we're doing here, is fantastic, right? I reached out, we decided to talk. This kind of thing is good too. But if you want a very direct and deliberate method, cold email with a VA.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say cold email. And you still cold email with volume,
1000%, 50 a day.
50 a day. Wow. Okay. I'm surprised to hear that. That's actually very encouraging. It's a very good thing to hear.
Yeah, and it works really well. And we use it for different things. So we use it to reach out to get people on a Zoom call, but we also use it to, for instance, get joint ventures. We also use it to drive people to. I have a email newsletter. It's called the Monetize Social Media Letter that I'm writing now. Because like when I said you got to pick a niche, so the niche that I picked, it's kind of a massive niche, I guess. It's not really focused down, is social media influencers, right? So they've got their YouTube channels, they got whatever, but they're not really making any money, right? But they know how to get people on to their list in terms of getting followers, right?
Hmm.
And so my contention is, and I've done it over and over again, so I know if we can siphon those people onto an email list and work a promotion, you're going to make money, right? Now, just let me go a little bit on a side note with the social media stuff, right? So uh, anybody who's looked at the numbers knows with social media, reach is minuscule. If you have 100,000 people on your as followers on your YouTube channel, you're probably only going to reach like 2% of them. You don't reach 100%, but with email, you can reach 99, percent. Obviously, that's better than 2%, right? And
Hmm.
so what we found is that a lot of these influencers, they just don't know. They don't know the numbers. They don't. And when we show them how easily we can put people on a list and what happens when you work that list properly, I mean, it's not hard to end up, working with them on a long-term basis.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do watch you. I don't watch TV, but I do watch YouTube. And there are certain channels that I go looking for them. I mean, they show up in the feed, but I go looking for them as well because I like what they've got, their content. A lot of stuff that I like, and I don't. It doesn't always YouTube doesn't always surface stuff you subscribe to. Or sometimes you go to a channel and you find out I think, "You subscribe to that channel. And I don't remember being even subscribed. I can't remember having seen that channel in 3 or 6
Hmm.
months. But the interesting thing, as you say, is that so vanishingly few of them. They'll occasionally have a product to sell and say like click below or whatever, but there's so vanishingly few of them who say, "Hey, I've got a newsletter," or just click to subscribe. They will do JV and affiliate promotions. I know they like to get money from YouTube itself based on channel growth and being, their ad revenue. But there's so few of them have their own list or their own thing where they're saying, "Hey, you can find out more." They're a rarity. They just don't. They seem to want to make their money or whatever money. They seem to think the opportunity for them is on the YouTube platform, which maybe it is for the biggest, but I think that's like a power law game where there's a very thin and narrow pyramid for people who actually make money that way, right?
Yeah, I would agree because I believe Goldman Sachs did a study, and I think
Hmm.
they said like 96% of influencers make less than 100,000, and 100,000 is what they consider to be, substantial enough. So, and something like 48% of them are making less than 15,000. So they're not really making that much money. I mean, my contention is, if you're making 75 grand a year, you're not doing bad from a
Yeah.
YouTube channel. But there's a lot of work involved and you can make a whole lot better. Also, I'm noticing a lot of folks on Instagram, right? They sell through Instagram, they have Linktree, they have all that stuff. But again, what they're missing is whatever they're making online doing that through social media would probably be exponentially higher if they had an email list and knew how to work that list or had somebody do it for them, right? So the workhorse is always email, right? Offline, the workhorse was direct mail. Now it's email. And knowing how to build that list, and they don't even want to really learn all that stuff. And so that's where we come in and we do performance deals with them. We say, look, got 100,000 people, right? What if we did this? So I'll share a quick story that I think is very, it's something any copywriter could do. Reach out to a niche of people on YouTube or whatever. But the reason I say YouTube is because you can tell what their follower count is. You really know what's going on there. More importantly, you can take a look at their videos and see which ones are getting great engagement. So one of the things that we did is we'll go to somebody who has no products. They might not even have a website, but they do have a following and they're getting great reviews on certain videos. And if those videos lend themselves to a how-to type product, what we do is we have them do an AMA, ask me anything, for like $100. We get people on a list, we sell the AMA, and then the people that bought and went through that, we then have a coaching program that's maybe 5 grand. And this is how we make their money. And they didn't have anything to begin with, no product, not even a website, nothing like that. That is eye-opening to these guys. They're like, wow, kind of like it was for me when we went from 40 leads to 500 leads. It was like, I got to do more of this. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for copywriters, but you got to know what you're doing. You've got to be confident in your copy and your ability to market as well. And you got to reach out to people.
Think the one other thing that's in that as well is you have to be willing to take on more of the workload because
Yeah.
these guys can't, they don't even know what Facebook ads, what the ad manager looks like. They certainly don't know how to work active campaign or another ESP. They don't know any of that shit. So you're going to have to take it all off their hands.
Yeah, you are, but all you're really taking off, essentially you're becoming sort of a CMO,
Hmm.
right? But you can keep it tight, you can keep it small. My whole contention is let's siphon everybody onto an email list. So what we teach them is, okay, here's what you need to do on your YouTube videos to get people to an email list. Here's what you need to do on Instagram. Everything should be content that leads them to opt in, not content that has them stay there and then you might or might not reach them because the algorithm does whatever the hell it does. And so everything's to siphon people on email list, and then really we're just email marketing. That's really what we're doing. Now we could set up like media through or media buys for Facebook and all that. I don't really do that. Um,
Hmm.
if we got to that point with some of these guys, and the reason is, by the way, because a lot of them are actually have so much content, they're so prolific that they are getting leads. They're just not doing anything intelligent with them from a marketing perspective.
And for these types of people, I mean, what are the ideal types of products for them to be able to sell through an email list? Is it info? Is it e-commerce? What type of stuff is it consulting?
I mean, you could do anything. I like info, right? I like info that solves an immediate problem, right? So um, I go after, but for instance, right now we're looking at a company that sells I'm trying to remember oh yeah. Okay, so this guy figured out how to do like Airbnb for RVs. That's a very neat idea, right?
Oh,
That's such a
yeah,
great idea. And I'm like, I got to look into it a little bit more, but we're looking at contacting him because of the fact that it's so unique and he's teaching a skill that people want. It's a money-making skill. It's a biz op offer. But so that's the kind of thing that we look at. Like, is it unique? Does it have a twist? Then does it actually help people do what they want to do? Like, so how to, that solves a problem in a unique way. That usually works well.
So the type of channel is already kind of a how-to channel. Usually that's already maybe teaching somebody a skill anyway, and then it's a very easy. It's almost just a format change to bring them into a email-based info offer, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It has to be how to in nature because we want to be able to create. Okay, so my opinion is that I hate to use absolutes. I say the best, but right now I think the best business model is a coaching model. Okay, because you can scale it, and if you spend $1,000 to get a coaching client, but you can charge them five, that's a pretty good return, right? You can't really do that with much else. You can't do that with salt and pepper shakers as an e-commerce, a vendor. And so info is really where I like to go to. But what we can do with e-com, and we've done this too, is they may sell something that actually also lends itself to info. And so we will bolt on a promotion to promote some kind of info product that's related to whatever product they purchased, you know, whatever it is. Like, let's say you bought a handgun, how to fire your weapon properly,
Hmm.
things like that.
And then just trying to get my head around it. And so it's that with that person who's got that channel, it's a how-to in nature. You're making that offer to them on the back end. Is there more scope for them to go further with that, to go deeper? Do they want to go deeper? I mean, like somebody, for example, who is a content creator, do they, you mentioned like the coaching model as like the best place for them to go after info. Are they prepared to do that? Is that too much of a leap for them to make? Or does that
Well,
actually work well?
yeah, for some of them it is. For some of them are like, there are people who just don't want to do that kind of stuff. They're not comfortable being, the face. But for those who are looking to monetize their followers and their content, it's not
Hmm.
much of a stretch for them to do it. We give them a format, and it's kind of like what we're doing here. It's like, okay, here's like 10 things that you need to cover for this. You're the expert, fill in the blanks, go teach it. That simple. It's really not that complicated. And as you do it, you learn more and you get feedback so you can enhance it and improve it. But we try to keep it real simple.
What I do like about this is, like the high ticket coaching, i.e., like all the biz op type ads in your feed on social media is like such a horribly like saturated space. I mean, like, you know, really the person who kind of really like kicked it off, I think probably was Sam Ovens. I know other people have done it. There was people before. I know Frank Kern and Kevin Nations and guys like that were doing this stuff years ago. I know Sam Ovens learned from Kevin Nations, but he really made it big. And then
Hmm.
obviously he like kind of sowed the seeds of like 10,000 other businesses that kind of cloned his model. And then that sort of like the main market, like the kind of out in front biz up is so super saturated now. It's harder and harder. But what you're talking about on the influencer side is like somebody doing the Airbnb hacking, for example, or with Airbnb hacking with RVs. Like that is
Yes,
so deeply niched that it's just a
it is.
great.
Oh,
It's that little bit of like it's not going to get saturated in that way that like the biz oppie space is. People. It's a bunch of people fighting over like trying to slice a pie ever thinner.
right. Yeah, and I actually got this idea, or I knew about it like roughly, but it gelled when I read one of Alan Sultanich's posts on
Hmm.
Nothing Out Back, and he was talking about, hey, we're coming up to a time where legitimate business opportunities, you can do very well with those. Whereas you've got the scammy stuff that you need to stay away from. And so I kind of put that in the back of my head and we started looking for those. So this guy is very niche. Not only is he selling a system on how to create an Airbnb through RVs, but you don't have to own the RVs, and he's selling it to Christians. Okay, now I don't care what the religious thing is, but he's niching it really well. And I
Yes,
mean,
yes,
my
yes,
goodness, you can't get much better than that, right? Um, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, and that's kind of what we look for. The
yes.
unique angle is critical because it'll increase response. If it's like what everybody else is selling, how to make money online, you gotta position it properly.
Yeah, it's the Christian part of things, and I know that's just one example, but it's that extra layer of affinity between the excuse me, between the
Bless you.
creator and their audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of what we're doing now. We're again, I've got agency work that I do, and it's great. But I saw this, in my opinion, is a huge gap in this market where influencers are starting to learn that they need to monetize, but they don't quite know how. A lot of
Hmm.
them are trying to monetize through social, which is fine if you have enough volume, but you're still leaving. Like if you make $1 million off of your Instagram, you could probably make $5 million if you used email along with it, right? I mean that's how it is. So, but they're not really aware of that. In fact, I'm working with a coach right now. Listen to this. This guy does no email at all. He makes about 10 grand a month. He's trying to build it up. I told him, I said, you would make like 40, 50 grand a month if you put some of these people on your email list and then work them properly. And he's now starting to understand. So a lot of these guys that are learning how to do social media, they're leaving out email completely. They don't even know, for instance, I can't remember where I got the stats from, but recent stats that I saw, you get about $2.80 back for every dollar that you spend on social, but you
Hmm.
get something like $36 back for every dollar you spend on email. That's 12x. Why in the hell would you not go for the 12x? I mean, yeah, kids, they just don't know. That's why. So it opens up the opportunity for copywriters to understand this process because you've got a market that actually wants to get better results. They want more income. They're not really sure how. And if you can come in at first with a performance deal and generate that revenue up front, then getting into a retainer or into a profit share is much easier.
Awesome. John, I'm gonna wrap it up there as it's getting dark out and I'm gonna have
Okay.
to go inside. But it was really great talking to you today. Where do people find you if they want to reach out to you and talk to you a bit more about some of the things we discussed?
Sure, they can reach me at my website, johnanghelache.com. They can also
Hmm.
email me. I'll give you the easy email because nobody can spell my name. Copybum, copybum at yahoo.com. That should be easy to
Okay,
remember.
that's a good one. But I'll put both in the YouTube description. And
Thank you.
actually, after I stop the recording, I gotta talk to you because there's somebody I know who might need your services. It's going to be
Oh,
interesting.
fantastic. Thank you.